Oh man, what a day. What a, like nap the whole time. Wait, Jolene,
What's up?
we're live.
Totally. What's good? How you doing?
I am good. I don't know how this is working out here. Like, the stripes and stripes, like.
No, because this definitely was not planned.
I need to up the security here at Monroe Manor.
Whatever.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good today.
Yes.
A lot of exciting things happened today.
It did. It did. Well, we have to ask, wow, never mind. I guess everybody has now caught on to who wants to be number one. Reggie, you are getting it like, yo.
It's not Reggie?
It's not Reggie.
Oh my, okay.
We have to give it up to
guess. Huh?
We have to give it up to Grind Time.
Grind Time. How you doing?
Congratulations. How you doing, cousin? All right. But Reggie came second. So what's up, everybody? I'm Mark Monroe, and I am accompanied by my wonderful co-host, co-producer, and good friend, the wonderful
Jolene GC in the place to be. What's good, y'all?
And this is the Cookout. So as you know, we do Trade Talk Tuesday and also Hot Take Thursday. But every now and then, we'll actually have a cookout session where we get to bring individuals from industry, whether from the financial markets or investment world, or also from the startup world, as you're going to probably recognize today, that are actually doing things that are changing the game. And that's going to be one of our guests today, but we will get into a little bit of that later. Don't worry. And today we're actually going to talk about quantum computing. But before we do all of that, right, Jolene, we got to get some housekeeping out of the way. So if you haven't subscribed yet, there's this button down below that just says subscribe, whether it's on, your laptop, your phone, your tablet. Just go ahead and click that button and you'll be introduced to a ton of content. If you're new here to the channel, welcome. If you're one of the cousins and you've been around for a while, what's good? Welcome back. Hope you had a great day. And then on top of that, if you like the content, go ahead and hit that like button. If you disagree or anything like that, go ahead and hit the other button. That's fair. Just give us some feedback because we always want to get better. And if you want to be in the know, or if you want to be the first in line, just like our friend Grind Time and also individuals like Reggie and Vic, then go ahead and hit that bell for the notifications. So that way you can be a part of the Cool Kids Club, AKA the Notification Squad. All right. So Jolene, we got a lot on our plate today.
We do. I was just sharing and, going through questions that the cousins have submitted. What's good? It's Jolene GC in the place to be. And today is Hot Take Thursday. I'm super excited about today. So now we have the Dow. Yo, the Dow was trying to show out. Okay. The Dow was at 300. I'm saying like comparatively speaking, yes. So we got the Dow coming in at 305.10 points. The S&P 500 was 45.76 points. The NASDAQ, still holding it down, 180.92 points. We have the VIX coming down just a little bit from the last time we talked about this on Tuesday to 16.57. And the 10-year Treasury note is down by about just a little sprinkle. It's at 1.64%. And so now we get down to the sector performance. As you know, there are 11 sectors. We track the top 3 and then the bottom 3. So the top 3, real estate, tech, and health. Okay. And then the bottom 3, we have industrials, financials, and energy. Now, for our pick performance, y'all know where to find our picks, but if you don't, head on over to our Instagram page at That Come Up Series. Just scroll through, find the latest post with the picks, which we call sips. Let me just take a sip right now because some of them are really showing out. Okay, we got, Tebow really wanted me to like throw some extra sauce in this one. So y'all, we just need to have a collective moment here,
I'm here with you. Let me go ahead and just load up.
Okay, load up.
One day I'm going to get this glove. I need to get the new gauntlet.
Yeah, you need something because I got a glove. You got to get it,
It's loading in. It's coming in very soon.
All right, here we go, y'all. This is AMD showing out, holding in, coming in at the top spot today. And then
who are we talking about?
AMD. AMD. Then we have NVDA with a 52-week high. Then Twilio was in the top three. So now for the bottom three, we have TSM, TAN, which is the solar ETF, and TBT. So those are the bottom three. And now we had a whole list, Mark, of 52-week highs. You already know FTNT, 52-week high again. Microsoft, 52-week high again. XPO, 52-week high again. And shout out to Kiki because Home Depot, another 52-week high. And TSM had earnings after the close.
So it's actually funny. TSM actually had earnings at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. And essentially it reflected into early morning trading. And that's so the stock was down. And I think it was just because of the fact that the stock ran so hot going into earnings, but they beat on the top and bottom line and their guidance was amazing. So, I mean,
and they're holding steady right now.
Yeah. I mean, they were down pretty heavy early in early trading, but then they rebounded significantly as we went into the close. So shout outs to you, TSM. Good job.
Holding strong. That also is one of TiVo's favorites. So Mark, you ready for some Black history?
Oh, let's do it. Of course.
All right, let me just pull up the documents. This is from our historian, Brian Quiet. Here we go.
Chancellor.
Yes. So today is April 14th. So today, on this day in Black history, April 14th, 1775, the Society for the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage was established. The first American Abolition Society, the Society for the Relief of the Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage, actually was established during that time on that day in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Quakers were the majority of the 24 men led by Anthony Benzenet, who originally founded the organization. Thomas Paine also was one of the founders. The organization was eventually led by Benjamin Franklin. This was the movement that garnered wider acceptance of the abolishment of slavery amongst the Quaker communities of Pennsylvania, who previously were known slave owners. Now, did you know that our dear friend Kim, on her mom's side, they trace some of their history and they have known Quakers on their side?
For real?
That were abolitionists. Yes, our friend Kim. Isn't that awesome? Kim, if you're in the comments, shout out to you and your family.
We got friends and family and cousins all around the world that are like literally creating history, or they're part of history. So
yes,
shout outs to you, Kim.
So Mark, there's so many things going on today.
Yes,
I'm really excited. So
I don't even know, where do we start?
I mean, we can get into our guests. This is a cookout. I feel like we should just leave them, at the front.
I think so too. I think, I don't think that we should leave them like waiting too long. So let's get into that. But you never know. They may even jump in the conversation. So, and like I said, you never know who's going to show up at the door. But ladies and gentlemen, now we talked about data. We talked about deep learning. We talk about processors and all this other great stuff. And, it's always great to talk about what's currently happening. Like, the lineage of things, the iterations, and those things are all great. But sometimes it's always good to just have a little peek as it pertains to what is the future? How is that future being built? And so why not start getting some understanding and knowledge as it pertains to quantum computing? And, honestly, when we here at the Come Up series, we like titans, we like pioneers, we like folks that are willing to challenge the status quo, that are willing to go above and beyond, folks that are willing to essentially also bring that knowledge back to the community and to teach folks that look like you and I. We have had the opportunity to have none other than Jan Goetz to join us here today for the cookout. And here's a little bit of background about this gentleman. He runs a company by the name of IQM, where he happens to reign supreme as CEO. And they are very much so focused in bringing quantum computing to Europe. And we're not just talking about London or Paris, we're talking about all of Europe. And just imagine what quantum computing, just imagine what that technology can do. And we're going to get into that today. So I guess we can open it up with a drum roll, but let's open the door to our cousin, Jan. Hey!
Hi, how are you
Hey,
doing?
nice to meet you. Hey.
All right, so coming all the way from Finland. So I think it's officially 3 a.m. It's like 3:11 a.m. where you're at. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're gonna try to get as much as we can knocked out today, so that way you could probably get some sleep and get some rest.
Yeah.
All right.
I try not to fall asleep. During this.
All right, so let's get straight into it. So tell the world a little bit about yourself, because essentially you have this company by the name of IQM, but it's interesting because did you actually intentionally mean to start IQM?
Well, so I'm a quantum physicist by training, and my plan was always to become a professor in the field. And usually how it works is that after you do your PhD, you kind of do a few postdocs here and there, and then you try to get a professorship. So I decided to do my first postdoc in Finland, and I did it here at the Technical University in Helsinki called Aalto. And then when the 2 years were over, that is like a typical time frame for a postdoc, I was discussing with my professor, okay, what should we do, and kind of which new jobs I could take and where. And then he just said, well, I've always had this idea to spin out a company, but I want to stay at the university. So he was saying that he wants to keep up his university group. So he needed someone to do it anyways. And then he asked, why don't you want to just do it? Then I thought, okay, maybe that's not so bad opportunity. So my plans for becoming a professor overnight basically turned into becoming an entrepreneur. And I just took the opportunity, and it was not me. So only me. We were 4 founders in the end. And I'm only one of them. So it was not planned at all. I was planning to leave Finland after 2 years and do something else. And now I'm still sitting here in Helsinki, and it's great after a couple of years.
Nice.
Wow.
Now, Jolene, you wanted to ask a question about Finland, just as a heads up.
Yes, we know you're from Germany, but you spent quite a bit of time in Finland. So what is it like living in the happiest place in the world? Just given, being in your field, and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think Finland is a great country. And for me, happiness, it's a relative thing, right? So you compare yourself to your environment. And I think the Finns are really great in kind of getting happy with the little things. So usually the country itself, it didn't have so much. So it's far up north. There's a lot of, let's say, forest and lakes. And in this way, I think people were just getting used to be happy with the little things. And this is, I think, a good characteristics of the whole population here, that they just see the opportunities. And whenever they kind of have some small successes, they kind of are really satisfied with this. So I wouldn't say, if I compare it to other places I lived, that people are, in a sense, more joyful or more happy, but they just see the world in a more positive way, I guess.
Wow, that's a lesson for life, though, being happy with what's before you, and having gratitude and finding that joy in the things that you have, no matter how big or small. So cool.
That's dope. All right, so let's get into it. You ready?
I'm ready, but
Yes.
we need some other cousins.
Hold on.
Okay.
All right, so there are some folks that definitely want to join the stage with us and geek out. Like, we have some fellow cousins that are ready to just straight up geek out with us. But first, before everybody before we get into the weeds of it, could you potentially explain to us, Professor, exactly, and Professor Extraordinaire as well as CEO of, in my opinion, probably one of the most innovative and up and coming companies for the future. What is quantum computing? There's a lot of folks that are probably in this room right now listening to or watching this live, or will probably come back and rewatch the live or watch it for the first time and probably not even understand what quantum computing is. Could you possibly explain it for them?
Sure, I can try at least. And I think it's important because for many people, quantum computing, when they hear it, they think it's like black magic or whatever. I don't understand what it is. And I think it's important to kind of demystify this and make sure that the concept, it's very simple. It's like a normal computer. You have a processor, you have a problem that you bring in, and then you get a result in the end. And what a quantum computer does is it takes shortcuts, and maybe now it's a little bit technical, but kind of the fancy thing is that it can create higher dimensions to calculate. But actually, it's not so complicated. So if you think about, so I'm here in Finland, let's say I want to go to the Silicon Valley and I'm on the planet Earth. So kind of I have to go around the globe. That's the shortest way I can take. But actually, I could take a shortcut if I have access to another dimension and drill a hole in the third dimension through the Earth, right? So there's a shortcut if I had access to this dimension, but I don't have a super drill. So I have to go around. But the quantum computer, actually, what it can do, it can take these kind of shortcuts in the mathematical space. So this is the basic concept. And in this way, it can speed up many calculations, and not just, let's say, by a little bit, do it a little bit faster here or there, but really kind of move the needle and make orders of magnitude. So there are some examples where calculation on a classical, even a supercomputer, would take thousands of years, but then the quantum computer could do it in just a few hundred seconds or so. And this is kind of, let's say, the real power. And the way it does it is by kind of these new dimensions. They come from the quantum world. So we are living in a classical world where what we can do is we can observe how an apple falls down the tree. This is what Newton did, and then he figured out gravity. But the quantum computer, kind of, he has access to this world, which we call the kind of quantum physics, where things happen a little bit differently. And it uses two fundamental concepts. One is superposition, which is where systems can be in several states at the same time. And there you can see already that there's a little bit more power if you can be, let's say, in state 0 and 1 at the same time, if you compare it to a classical bit. Nice. But actually, the more powerful thing, and this is where it comes a little bit, let's say, complicated, is a concept called entanglement. This is what Albert Einstein called spooky action at a distance, but it's actually not that spooky. It just means that if you have several of these quantum systems, they all know at the same time what all of the other guys are doing. So it's kind of real teamwork. And in this way, they speed up. So in a nutshell, it's just a kind of a system which has access to these degrees of freedom. And they all know what all the others are doing. And in this way, they just do it much faster. So this is kind of the high level concept of a quantum computer, let's say.
Okay. Now, all right. So check this out. We got some folks that are ready to geek out. So, cousins, the door is open. We got cousins, Kayla Wilson, and also the professor, Prentice Whitley. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's about to be so much. It's going to be so awesome. So honestly, you guys ready to geek out?
Oh, very much. Very much.
Okay. All right. So, take it away.
Cool. So we got a couple questions for you, but you're also going to try to make it, high level, but make sure that it's digestible, because there's some people who have never touched a lick of physics. So we're trying to keep it there. So for that, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is you have a tagline, and this tagline says fast lane to quantum advantage. So what exactly is implied by advantage?
Well, advantage means that you can do something better than with a classical computer. So what we call quantum advantage is if you use a quantum computer to solve a real business problem. And this is, we are not there yet. So quantum is still a very early technology, and it's deep tech. And this kind of stage when you have a machine, it solves a problem, it uses quantum, and it does it much faster than a classical machine. And this way you create value. So it's a business case behind it. This is what people in the field call quantum advantage. And this is, of course, let's say, what the target state that everyone is trying to reach, because this means in the end, you make money with your quantum computer.
Absolutely.
Cool. That's amazing. Yeah. So with classical computing, right, there are fundamental advantages to memory capacity, not only structurally but physically. How does the quantum leap so to speak, pun intended. How does that alleviate or resolve that barrier?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that quantum computing, it can speed up certain problems, not all problems of the world. And usually these problems, they have something in common, is that to calculate the result, it's getting quite complicated already for a relatively small problem size. So the typical problem, the way people call it, is this traveling salesman problem, where you have a map with a lot of rivers on it and then a couple of bridges, and you try to find the best route. So this is in a sense what we do in Google Maps if you try to find the best way. And there are a couple of these type of problems where it's already quite complicated to get the answer. A good example to realize this is if you have an airport and you have the planes coming in and out and a couple of gates. Already with a relatively small gate number for the airplanes, it's kind of impossible to calculate the optimal solution on which gate they should arrive at to minimize the waiting time for the airplanes, which is then the cost factor. So these are the type of problems, and I think so something that touches all of us is how do we wake up in the morning, and many people drink coffee, and this is a nice example that's often used, the caffeine molecule, for example, to simulate this. It's impossible for a classical computer, but it doesn't have actually so many atoms in it. So these are the kind of problems with relatively small system size. It gets already impossible for the classical machines to calculate it, and this is where the quantum computers can help.
That is awesome. That's really awesome.
Dope.
So just to kind of get a little bit more so that way the cousins kind of understand what IQM is, what would you say is kind of like your differentiated ability to like solve some of these complex problems, or what separates or your competitive advantage of IQM specifically?
Right, what's your moat?
Yeah. So as I said, we're still early in the game of quantum computing, and there is a big gap between what you would need to run a certain application and what the hardware actually can do at the moment. And if you look at, let's say, computing as such, there are always more hardware efficient implementations and less hardware efficient implementations. So usually if you have a laptop computer now to watch here our conversation, this is a general purpose universal computer. You can basically program in any problem and it gives you the answer. And these general purpose systems, usually they have a quite big hardware overhead. This is kind of what you get with this. So it's not the most hardware efficient implementation. And if you want to do something hardware efficient, which we want to do in quantum because the hardware is the limiting factor, usually what you do is you build application specific circuits, so these so-called ASICs. These are processors that can do a certain task very well, but then all the rest they suck at. And so this is kind of what we do in quantum computing in IQM is we say, okay, we are limited by the hardware. It's not powerful enough yet. So we have to do the most hardware efficient thing we can do. And this is building application specific circuits. So how you can imagine this is that, for example, we would build a dedicated processor for, let's say, simulating quantum chemistry. I just gave the caffeine molecule, but then you could not use this processor so much to do other things. For example, the gate assignment problem that I was talking about. So this is kind of the drawback. There's no free lunch, right? So if you do this, you would have to build a specific processor, of course, for all the other verticals. But for us, it makes sense anyways, because we are a startup, and what we really need to do is kind of get early into the market to get the traction and the revenue going. So this is why we say, okay, we want to be early. We want to kind of get to this quantum advantage as fast as possible. And this is why we do it in this application specific way. And then if we are there, we can still build the general purpose computer later, let's say.
Okay. Yeah, so that's dope. So the idea of the general purpose computer kind of segues into the idea of what I've been trying to get along in the Facebook group is trying to translate how the theoretical becomes the practical and
Right.
the useful, right? And so, like, what are some of your ways where, like, the quantum computing impact it can solve today's or some of life challenges that we're facing today, like some of the use cases you see?
Yeah, well, so theoretically, there are many use cases where quantum computing can help. So if you Google it, you find always long lists. But the real question at the moment is, what are the low-hanging fruits?
Right.
Because this is what people are targeting, really the first ones. My feeling currently actually is that the low-hanging fruits are either in the sector of finance, so this is like option pricing, derivative pricing, or then the chemistry problems, and these are the ones. And I think especially on the financial sector, if you're a bank, you are already happy, let's say, with a few percent performance increase. If you can run your algorithm better already by a couple of percent, actually it moves the needle a lot. And you don't need this, what many people call exponential speed up, where you really kind of do things orders of magnitude faster. And then, of course, the banks usually have also the financial power to tap into the technology quite early. So this is, I think, why my bet at the moment would be either on the financials or then on this quantum chemistry. So simulating new types of materials, for example, in solar cells or batteries for electrical vehicles or so.
We have a SIP that, well, never mind, we'll talk about that later.
Heard some electric vehicles, battery.
And manipulating materials, and we have a SIP for that too as well. So, okay, yeah, Sister Kayla.
So I guess I got a question. What would you say is kind of the greatest challenge right now for quantum computing to be adopted? What do you think is kind of like the biggest barriers, or is it timeline? Is it just, we're just not there yet in technical capabilities? What would you say is kind of the barrier?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that we are not there yet to use quantum computers. And on the other hand, there's a big hype about it. Everyone talks about this. And this means that often, for example, if we talk to the big corporates, their management teams, they say, okay, what do we need to do to get into quantum? I think it's this kind of expectation management of kind of telling people, okay, this is where we are right now. You can do proof of concepts, but you will not generate a kind of business advantage yet. And it will still take a couple of years. And I think this is something we have to get straight, because otherwise people, in a sense, they get frustrated if they start investing now and then they expect something to happen tomorrow and it's not going to happen. I think we create a bubble, and then at some point the bubble will explode. So I think that's the thing, kind of being honest and telling people, okay, it has a huge potential, but also it still takes quite some time until we are there, and making this clear. I think that's very important.
So do you have like a projected timeline that you could maybe, at least what you could think about that it would be?
Yeah, it depends heavily on what you want to do. So it's not so that these machines that we are currently building, they're totally useless, but we use them at the moment for research and education. And that's actually very important, because we have already now a global shortage in talent. So we need to be very active in educating also the next generation task force. And people, and now people means usually publicly funded organizations, they're willing to pay quite a lot of money. So just to give you a few examples, IBM has sold a system to a German research organization for 41 million euros, which is roughly the same in dollars, let's say. We have been selling a system for 21 million euros. There are now tenders out for similar prices. So there is quite some money on the table now to get such a system, not to do any business with it, but just to do the education that's necessary. But that's obviously not the real answer to your question. But the question is, when is it interesting for the big corporates? And my feeling is that probably we still need another 5 years or so until they really can use it to do something meaningful.
So that sounds like a couple of long-term positions. Go ahead,
right? Yeah, no, right in line with our philosophy, man. So so we kind of look ahead, right? And we're starting to see that the world's slowly kind of coming around to seeing that good ecological stewardship and adherence to diversity are not only good for the climate, but they're good for the bottom line. Where do you see IQM and quantum computing's role in helping countries and companies achieve their long-term ESG and UN sustainable goals?
Yeah, well, that's a very important point, of course. And I mean, quantum can help there, direct and indirect. I think one challenge before answering the question is that it is a quite expensive technology. So I just dropped some numbers. And if you are, let's say, either a small country or even a smaller university, you don't have access to the technology directly, and I think that's a problem. How can we make sure that everyone gets access to the technology? Of course, you can always give indirect access through the cloud or so, But I think if you really also want to actively contribute to the technology, it's important that you get also the hardware so that that people can play around with this. And I think this is a challenge that globally we have to address. To how do these next generation technologies, how do we make them available to all places on this planet? But then I think quantum computers, they can help on the direct side. If you look at computing, and here we're talking about this field of supercomputing centers, they consume quite a lot of energy. So these are really huge buildings stacked with computers, and you almost need a power plant to operate them, which of course becomes a problem if we build more and more of those. And there are even regions in the world where it's not allowed anymore to turn on a new supercomputing center unless you turn off an old one. Here I think quantum computer can help because they, by providing this speed up, you need less resources on the energy consumption side, very directly. This is important. But then of course the results of quantum computers, they also can help a lot, because if you think about some of the problems that they can solve, for example, carbon capture, nitrogen fixation, but also let's say more simple things, let's say aircraft climb optimization, they all help, for example, reducing the carbon footprint. So I think we will see both the direct and the indirect benefits of the quantum computers. But I think what we need to do is to make them accessible to the whole society. And this is still something where we have to work on a lot.
That's awesome. That was awesome. So I guess one of the other questions is just to kind of make sure that there's going to be some people who want to understand physics, or, who might be going to school right now, who are trying to, get in this field. So for somebody who is wanting to do what you do, or to start a business in this particular arena of quantum, what would you suggest? What would be your advice to that person? What should they study? How could they prepare? What are some of the challenges? I think that'd be incredibly helpful. So much.
Yeah. So I think to get into quantum or quantum computing, you don't have to be a PhD in quantum physics. I think that's important to understand now that the technology is leaving the university research labs. And in this sense, for example, in IQM, we are also hiring a lot software developers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers who are putting the stuff together. And I think in all of these fields also you can be innovative and have new ideas and business ideas. So we are building the whole system, of course, but in the end, you need a whole supply chain. And in all of those, for the control, electronics, all of this, I think there's a market by itself, and you can contribute. To enter a quantum, I think you just need to be curious and kind of start reading and get excited about this. Of course, it helps if you have some kind of technical understanding. But then into the second part of the question of how to start a business or what you have to do, actually, for me, that's always a riddle, because I was just thrown into the cold water. No one was really asking me. And then we just did it. And when I started, I had no clue. I mean, I'm a physicist. I have no clue about investing, or at least back then I had no clue. And even I was in some of these investor calls and people asked me, what is a cap table? I had no clue what it means. And I just came up with some answers. And I think that's important to know that, you don't have to be, unless you're a little bit kind of spontaneous, and you can learn all of these things. It's just words in the end. And so I think the barrier to just try it, it's quite low. And my suggestion or my advice is just give it a try. If it doesn't fly, it's not a problem, right? But at least you gave it a try.
Right. They say fail fast.
Yeah, there you go. So oh yeah. Do you want to add something to that, Mark? You good?
No, he definitely put all the meat and all the sauce on top of it. So go ahead. I'm geeking out right now because I get to watch you all geek out. So
this is great, man. This is great. So here at the Come Up, right? And one of the things that I'm passionate about and we're passionate about is closing the racial wealth gap for Black Americans, things that we've endured for centuries, and we're going to do it in one generation. And the vehicle we do that through currently is investing through the market and using current vehicles through the market to do that. And we analyze companies and we break them down to their core elements, and we find out which ones are viable and which ones are focused on the future. And we do that by starting at the end and working our way back. And quantum computing, in my eyes, is kind of the end, in a lot of ways, of a new phase. So do you see any companies, public or private, that you'd be interested in working with in now or in the future, and that would be kind of aligned with your goals and your objectives, and why?
Yeah, I think there are, of course, many exciting companies. And I think the main question for me would be is that, okay, are they really innovating? Are they doing something completely new, or are they just like taking some existing stuff and rebranding it or so? Yeah, and I think for me, it's always exciting also then to see, let's say, two fields combined. So of course, now it might sound like a combination of buzzwords, but there are some concepts to combine quantum, for example, with machine learning. And then you bring two kind of already disruptive components together and create something new. And I think this is the really exciting stuff, because then you have two enabling technologies to do some of the really interesting problems. So I think having a lookout also for these companies that say, okay, we take enabling technologies, which are already quite disruptive, but then we bring them together to build something completely new. I think that's really fascinating.
So, really
so I got a question. This is kind of off the dome though. Have you heard much about, I would imagine you would, but just want to put this out here, about DNA computing? Have you heard about that?
Yeah, I have heard about it, but I must say I'm not an expert at all. But there are all kinds of, as I said, these new approaches. And I think it's really interesting, and we should look into this. For example, there are other things are this kind of, let's say, quantum brain interfaces and such kind of things. So there are really interesting ideas. And the thing is that we are still very early also with quantum. And many of these things are going on in the research labs. And the question is, when is the right time to kind of pull them out of the universities and do something real for them? But I think this is exactly what we have to do, is take these concepts and bring them together. At least let's have the people talk to each other. That's a problem we also have in quantum computing, that most of the, let's say, quantum experts, they're physicists by training, but now we want to industrialize the technology, which means that we have to get the software experts on board, we have to get the electrical engineers on board, and they talk completely different languages. So even we are all working in one company, even people don't understand each other, and they're all technical people because they come from so different backgrounds. And I think that's important, that very early in the process, the different fields start talking to each other so that they understand. And if it's some new computing paradigms or so or whatever, it's important that you kind of level your expectations and your wording.
So what you're, I was about to say, Jan, what you're saying is a convergence of innovative ideas and technologies will bring about a disruptive, innovative future.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Also, because it forces you to kind of challenge and rethink your own approach. Because if you have to explain it to someone else who is a very smart person, but just has a different way of thinking about the problem, then you start challenging actually your own ideas. And it means that sometimes you figure out, well, why are we actually doing it this way? Wouldn't it be much smarter to do it the other way around? And I think these are the moments where really innovation happens, because you find a new path to the solution that is kind of out of your box, out of your thinking that you were. I mean, you've been working in this field for years or decades even, so you're very used to your way of thinking. But now someone comes from the side and kicks you and says, hey, why don't you do it the other way? And then I think these are the really innovative moments that happen.
So I do have a question, just a quick question. As we think about quantum computing, and we kind of like think that, okay, hey, we're a few years out. What do you think that effect will be once when we get to a point in quantum computing? How could that affect, say, for example, what we know of data centers today? I mean, one of the key things that, of course, that everybody's talking about is like blockchain technology, and the flow of how is it that we exchange cryptocurrency, and then on top of that, just solving other problems like, for example, health related issues. You know, could you kind of possibly give us some kind of like illustration of what you kind of envision what that world would look like?
Yeah, sure. And so for me, at least in the first phase, the quantum computers, maybe already there, the name is a little bit misconceptional, because the quantum computers, they will be in the data centers, but they will work like an accelerator. So maybe you're familiar with this concept in AI, where you use the graphical processors as accelerators. It's basically the same thing, where you have the quantum processor and you have a hybrid algorithm. And at some point of the algorithm, you reach the point where the problem becomes really complicated. And then the data center says, okay, this part now goes to the quantum computer and it starts accelerating. So this means for us as the normal users, we probably don't even recognize that now there's a quantum computer working on the problem. So it's more like the indirect thing. Just to give you an example, one of the problems is this traffic flow optimization. Volkswagen, for example, they already did this once at the World Conference, and they were using for their buses to drive the people around, optimizing the routes. But then, of course, if you're sitting in the bus, you don't recognize that somewhere in a data center, a quantum computing is optimizing the traffic flow. So this is where you would kind of indirectly benefit if you're standing in a traffic jam every morning in your car, right? And then at some point it's getting faster because a quantum computer is helping you. You don't realize that now it's a quantum computer, right? But so this is how you indirectly benefit. But then, as you mentioned, some other problems are, for example, in the drug development, and there maybe you see more directly than the impact. If you find a new I don't know, a medical or so that helps you to stay healthy.
Nice.
A question. Wait, did you have a follow-up question, Mark? Because I want to.
I'm gonna let y'all rock. I'm gonna just sit back and just drink my water.
Okay. So you said something, this is bringing it back to the beginning of the conversation. You said something that caught my attention. You were talking about the entanglements, and you were talking about multiple elements working together to solve a problem. So back with that in mind, I'm interested in how do we, because we are a group working together to solve the problem of this racial wealth gap. So what are some of the principles that we can use from the concept of entanglement as it relates to quantum computing to solve that problem? Like, basically what I'm asking is, how do we take those principles that sound like collaboration and apply it to working together as a group?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. And also, I mean, this goes a little bit then to the values and the way we work in IQM, where we are very, let's say, collaborative and ecosystem building. So we are a company headquartered in Finland, and we have offices in other places in Europe. And the reason I'm telling this is that in Europe, we don't have the big tech corporates, for example, like you have in the US. There's no IBM or Google or so who could do it alone. So this means the hope also of the European tech scene is now really on the startups. But then a startup, again, cannot do it all alone. So we need to partner up. And this is what we do a lot in IQM. We say, okay, we can do something very well, which is building the hardware, the actual processors. But then other parts we cannot solve so well, and we are collaborating actually quite heavily with many others, which is very fruitful, because I think also, again, in a group you start challenging yourself. You have to talk to each other. You have to define interfaces, for example, and this is something that brings the industry forward. So I think this concept of entanglement, if you then project it to society, it's very powerful, because we as humans, we are social people, right? We want to interact and we want to entangle, in a sense, with others and work together. And I have never actually seen it from this perspective, but I think it's a great it's a great way of thinking about it, that okay, together we are strong, and together we can do something that maybe as individuals we would never reach.
Yeah, so it goes back to, like, from what I heard that you said a lot. So one of the key things that you said stuck out to me was developing an ecosystem, having startups work together, knowing what you don't know. But then it's like, how do you know what you don't know that you don't know when you're you know what I'm saying, like, together? So you give me some things to think about as we, continue to build our own community, I personally will be thinking about these concepts of entanglement and how we apply that going forward to tackle these big problems in a short amount of time. So thank you for that.
I got a question. As there's a lot of people that probably have some affiliation or interest or investments in crypto. So how do you project or think this concept of quantum computing can affect the use of crypto? There's some use cases that you can think of in that regard.
Yeah, sure. And I think you can watch it from two angles. One is that actually the whole topic of quantum, it became, let's say, or the first hype it saw was in the 90s when a guy called Peter Shor was developing an algorithm, which is now named after him, Shor's algorithm, which is to break encryption by factorizing large numbers. And this, of course, it's not creating value through quantum, but it's kind of, you use it to attack someone. And I think that's not the right driver. At least for me, it's not the right driver to do quantum by being motivated to break someone else's codes or so. But this is, of course, a thing. And a lot of the money also, let's say, from the military side that's flowing into the topic, it's coming based on this motivation. But I think quantum also, it can help on the real value generation side. Not only with crypto, but there, I think what we really have to look into is this topic of AI and machine learning and quantum and how it can be applied together. For example, in pattern recognition, this is one of the things. And how can you use this pattern recognition thing, for example, and if you are in the financial sector and apply it to some of the problems that you have.
So then that also brings up a good point about when you were talking about breaking things. As we know, there's always going to be some flawed or, adverse concept that is, built into these different concepts. So what would you say is do you see that quantum could potentially be used as a threat or even a weapon in some regard? How would that affect people in a negative sense too? That way just people can be aware.
Yeah, that is one of the things. I mean, quantum is a highly strategic technology, and all the governments in the world are realizing this. And it leads us now to a situation which I don't like a lot, but some people even call it techno-nationalism. So everyone wants to have the technology owned by themselves. Right. And it goes very much against this concept that I was mentioning earlier, that I think the technology should be available to everyone. But of course, we have to be careful because maybe we don't want that it goes into the wrong hands, right? And this is something that we as a community also have to figure out. How do we make sure that we make it as available as possible to everyone, but we make sure that the technology can be not used in the wrong way by the wrong people? And I think this is something as a society we have to discuss and make sure. And it's a good question. And it's in a sense, yeah, we see there also we as a startup, on the one hand, we are benefiting from this because many also governments here in Europe, they are really protecting us and putting a lot of money into us. But then again, they say, okay, we do this, but then the technology has to be European, for example, which for me is I think globally, right? So I see the benefits, but I also see the long-term threat. And this is something we have to figure out. How do we deal with this?
We got space for one more, y'all?
Go ahead.
Okay. Because I wanted to get into the EU quantum project that you just they announced that you were the head of there. So this for the cousins. This is a quantum project consortium that includes startups, industry leaders, research centers, supercomputing centers, and academia. And the goals are going to accelerate commercialization through an innovative co-design concept. Ultimately, they're supposed to be running this project for about 4 years, and I'm really excited that they're planning on developing a 54-qubit quantum processor. Jan, is that correct? Okay. So could you kind of give us a little bit more info about that, and like kind of what do you see the end goals, and like how do you see that kind of coming together, and give us some progress on it?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question because I think it combines many of the topics that that we have covered here today. It's a project as such with many participants. So there's this ecosystem thinking, and I think it's great because it combines the academic sector. So there are university groups involved, but it also combines industry. There's Infineon, for example, a chip manufacturer involved. So we really bring there the different people and fields together. And then the content is to build these application specific systems that we talked about to create this shortcut by being very hardware efficient. It uses a concept that we call digital analog. And maybe that's interesting to just say a few words about this, because we are used to this transistor-based digital computing nowadays quite a lot. But actually in the early days of computing, there was a lot of analog computing where you just implemented the mathematical problem directly into the hardware. And this is something actually that works also very nice on the quantum side. It goes in the direction of simulation. So that you really directly simulate the problem. And again, what we are doing here is really trying to build the most hardware efficient systems that you can have. And we are combining here digital concepts, so gate-based concepts with these analog simulations. And in this way, we are combining the best of two worlds. So we are really here kind of bringing two disruptive concepts in a way together. So this was something that we touched upon earlier. And in this way, people are very excited about this. So hopefully the outcome with this is, so that you mentioned this 54 qubits. It sounds maybe like an odd number to people. Why 54, right? Why didn't you do 56? And the reason is that with this 54, this is exact, or not exactly, but this is roughly the threshold on which you kind of cross the border from what a classical computer could do. There was some hype about some news that Google did a while ago on doing an experiment exactly with a 54 qubit chip. They only used 53 of them because one of them they couldn't use. But anyways, they did this experiment, I think in 200 seconds or so. They ran an algorithm, and then they said that, okay, on a classical supercomputer, it would take 10,000 years. A little time afterwards, IBM came and said, okay, maybe if we do it, it only takes 2.5 days or so. But that's not the point. I think the point is that they did something very fast that would take much longer on a classical machine. The problem there is that they did an arbitrary circuit. I mean, it was a huge milestone for it was great what they did and that they did it, but there was no real value generation yet. So this brings us back to this question of quantum advantage. So they didn't reach this quantum advantage there because they ran an arbitrary algorithm. And the next step, of course, is to do something meaningful with it.
You guys look like you got a question mark. You got any questions?
There's some questions in the chat though about how this can solve, or what people are asking for real world applications, you know, when it comes to you know, cancer cures and other, you know, elements. I mean, we're in the middle of I don't know if we're in the end of the pandemic or what, but you know what I mean? Like how can we use that to solve some of these issues?
Yeah, of course, many people have asked me, if we had a quantum computer, would have solved the pandemic or not? I think it's not so easy. But in this in the drug discovery field, there are two sides from which you can come. One is this direct simulation of the molecules. So if you have some new medicine that you want to develop, you can say, okay, I start simulating from scratch the molecule and I try to find out the properties and how it's going to work. So this is one thing. But actually also the other thing, it brings us back to this AI question, is that usually the way it goes is that in the drug development is you try all kinds of combinations of already existing molecules, and there you can, or at least people are excited to use this concept of pattern recognition in AI and quantum to kind of find the right combinations faster. So these are the two approaches at the moment that you could go in the drug development, either implement it directly in a very bottom-up approach, but I think this is a little bit further down the road. I think the more promising one is this kind of using it to find the right combinations and in this way get a good new solution.
That actually brings up a really good point. Just to, piggyback on that, specifically in the drug development, because even when you look at like organic chemistry, that has a lot to do, or even proteins, it's all about the folding structures and knowing those. That's why you got DeepMind, Google doing what they're doing over there and things of that. And so having something that's able to do all these different simulations to see what would be the best fit case scenario, to give you an example, like Tylenol, just if you were to reverse that type of chemistry structure, that can now be a liver toxin. And it's really just based on the same ingredients, but how they're put together does matter. So that's actually really fascinating to be used in an area like that. But that's just my own personal example to that.
So question clearly. So looking at it from a point of, let's say, getting to some of the players that we see out there today. So as of recently, we heard of NVDA with their GTC conference, where they're definitely using deep learning and artificial intelligence very, very heavily. Then on top of that, from one side of the spectrum, we're going all the way to companies like Tesla on the autonomous side. What part could say, and both of them are going in the areas of autonomy for, let's say, autonomous vehicles. What could quantum computing do in solving, really like a worldwide, issue of, traffic, what you mentioned earlier, in smart cities or smarter cities? Where do you think that we could be if all goes well, or if all predictions are correct in quantum computing? What do you think that world would look like with quantum computing tied to, say, for example, autonomous self-driving, or just autonomy in general? Are we looking at next iRobots like walking amongst us?
Well, that's a good point. And of course, the main concept of quantum computing is to be in this kind of superposition state. And also this is it's important to know the consequences. It means we will never get a definite answer in a single shot. But usually what happens if we run the same algorithm over and over again, and then we kind of average and get the probability. So this kind of means that many of these problems, I think the question is there really a use case already, if you think about real-time optimization, for example, or what would be actually the execution time? And these are things we still have to figure out. But I'm very sure that we will figure out the solutions, and we will at some point live in a world where the quantum computers can execute so fast that you get the real-time answer to your optimization problem. For example, if you are in an autonomous city and you have to find out, okay, do I now switch on this traffic light to red or green or so? And in this way, well, for me, it's always hard to imagine what the world would look like if we have the computing power to optimize everything, because this would be the perfect world, right? If everything is optimized, everyone is happy. Maybe then I don't know what the human beings would do. Would they just sit at home and
We're flawed,
drink coffee?
So that might be problematic.
Well, that was it for me. I think officially, is he officially off the hot seat, y'all?
Yep, he's good.
Officially.
You did great. It was awesome.
You did great.
Thank you so much. You are officially off the hot seat, and I think officially you have been knighted officially as a cousin of the Come Up series. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was really great. I really enjoyed the discussion.
And we really thank you for taking out the time. I mean, just to, to help give some definition to what is quantum computing. And then on top of that, discussing even further use cases and how is it that we can look to solve problems, and what is it that we should be looking for as it pertains to value generation and value added across the board, not just for anything specific, but just across the board in totality. So I love that. Jan, you are welcome at any time. I do have one final question for you. Is there by any chance that if IQM would ever think to do crowdsource funding of allowing the Come Up cousins to be able to take part in investing into IQM as, say, for example, on a public side, would that be possible? Well,
I pretty much think so. I think the topic of funding is very important because it's deep tech, it's early, we still need a lot of money. And there are many discussions around, okay, what's the right way actually to finance it all the way through? And in this way, I think also there we have to be innovative in kind of revolutionizing also a little bit the venture world and how all of this works. And I think examples like this would be great to get them going. Yes.
Yes, because then that way it allows the public to be able to take part. And, you know, for those of us that want to see that future and want to see, you know, that vision of what IQM produces, I mean, move forward and have a part in that. So that would be pretty cool.
That would be awesome, because you know how I feel about labor and leisure. Okay. No more labor. No more labor. It is all about leisure. And if quantum computing solves that, take my money. I will do that.
All day. All right. So now that Jan, Danke. Now, Jolene, I guess it's time for a lightning round, because you did say it is Hot Take Thursday.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
guess Jan is no longer on the hot seat, but now that places me on the hot seat.
And whoever else wants to smoke, you know?
Oh, okay.
Now, my question is for Jan too, because now, Jan, you are staying up. You are a straight trooper, the real
It's 3 in the
MVP.
morning.
So my question to you, you have some options here. You can stay as part and like be a part of the Hot Take Thursdays, which we just go over questions that have to do with the news, or you can say goodnight, because I definitely don't want to.
I definitely want you to get rest.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay. I mean, now I'm awake anyways, and
right.
I'm your real cousin now. Hey now.
All right. Okay. Now, yeah, you're officially a cousin. Okay. That was a trick question. We weren't going to let you out. No, just kidding. All right. Let me just pull up the questions. Okay. So this is the lightning round. All right. And so we're just going to fly through them.
Let's do it.
It can be anything, y'all. So just be prepared.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. So first question, let me start from the bottom here. All right. First question. It says TSM had clean earnings, but the stock took a dip. Were the earnings already baked in? Go.
I think that the earnings were slightly baked in. I think that honestly, it's like, you know, sometimes you get to a point where good news becomes kind of like bad news for earnings. I mean, it's kind of like moving the same way that how NVIDIA runs up going into earnings, reports something solid, and then essentially the stock sometimes takes a dive. And then after a while, it comes right back. I feel a little bit differently about TSM because of the fact that, you know, phenomenal quarter, phenomenal earnings, and then on top of that, phenomenal demand that awaits it for the second half of this year. So honestly, I think that the stock is just taking a slight little breather after it had a good run up along with some of the other infrastructure semiconductors out there. But I think in moving forward, I think that, you know, you're going to see, you know, the stock is going to go ahead and challenge even further highs.
All right. So sticking with TSM, now, do you think that did the TSM earnings give any insight into how Apple or AMD will report? Oh, the SIP means yes. Do you want to further elaborate on that?
I think that ultimately you're starting to see a lot of pent up demand there. And due to the fact that you are dealing with shortages, it only just increases the demand. And then essentially you're going to have like kind of like this, since demand is at a high, we're going to be going through periods in which that we're coming down just so as supply and demand ultimately balances out. But I think that, again, that this is set up for all the way going into 2022, where I'm projecting Q2 of 2022. You're going to expect a significant amount of performance that's going to be coming through. It's going to start off a little bit slowly, so you probably may see that, but looking forward and their guidance, and that's really where people need to pay attention to, not just the earnings, pay attention to what the guidance says. And essentially where I'm looking at and projecting for companies like AMD specifically, I think that given that they have a lot of demand, so you have your traditional demand of, you know, PlayStation, Xbox, and standard consumer-based products, but then also you have this other new line of business, which is also servers and data centers. Mm-hmm. But then also you also have autonomous driving, which they're powering, you know, new Tesla vehicles. So essentially that's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, and AMD is the second largest customer of TSM, and Apple being number one. So I think that honestly, they're in good shape. I think it's just a matter of essentially just riding the wave over the next few quarters, like I said, going all the way to Q2 2022.
All right, so I didn't pull it up yet, but I do remember seeing you making a comment on Twitter about Apple and crypto and game over. Say some more.
Man, you can't post anything anymore.
You can.
So looking forward, I said that pretty much if we see Apple literally expand its digital wallet to allowing cryptocurrency to be exchanged or to be even acquired or to just be used as a form of payment, then that completely changes the game. Why do I say that? Looking at what's taking place in different areas around the world in which that you see Apple Pay as a major use case across the board. Now you just added in digital currency or cryptocurrency into the process. That's another game changer. And if you think about it, with Apple, over 1 billion users, over 1 billion devices that have access to that. I mean, just imagine that kind of like dwarfs any bank. I mean, no shade to Square, but or with its Cash App. But honestly, I think Cash App will be number 2 when it comes to digital wallets if Apple allows that to happen.
Anyway, I'll keep my thoughts to myself. Okay, so now this is still TSM. There are a lot of questions about TSM. So
y'all are coming for me today.
The question is, TSM are saying that chip shortage can last till 2022. Does that break the thesis for AMD?
No, it does not. If anything, it strengthens the thesis for AMD because of the fact that, again, you have the demand there.
All right. So someone says, with so much innovation occurring, should we expect the equal weight S&P to tank?
No. I mean, if anything, essentially that you have 26% of the S&P 500 is built out of 7 out of the top 10 companies on the S&P 500. So, I mean, if you think about that, I mean, and honestly, are they going anywhere? No. I think that ultimately they took a break and they've been sitting there at kind of like flat for the year. And if Dan Ives' thesis is correct, where we see tech going for another 30% run, then that moves the S&P 500 from where it currently sits today all the way up to about 44 to about 4,500 in the S&P 500.
All right. So another question is, again, this is AMD still. So AMD was upgraded to $100. Does that 140 strike or price target still hold for this year?
Probably it doesn't hold for this year. I don't think it was never expected to hold for 2021. I think it was going into the 2022, but essentially if I was trading it personally, if I was trading it, I would be looking at, honestly playing that up for its momentum and then ultimately looking to roll or to get out. I'm playing with this Tesla black card. Hey, I want to go test to see if that download beta is available in my car.
Oh, is it ready? Is it ready?
I don't know yet. I keep testing every day.
Did you, Mark, or anyone really, did you see anything about India's Minister of Transport urging Tesla to start production ASAP? Do you have any thoughts on that for Tesla? All right, we got 2 sips. Wait, did you all tell Cousin Jan about the sips?
Oh yeah,
No.
you need to explain it.
I know he's
He's probably like, what are these guys doing?
Okay,
What's
you
wrong
can't
with
invite
them?
people to the cookout and then don't tell them the customs.
Oh, you can tell him. You can tell him.
So, Jan, anytime there is a sip that's taken, it usually means something good. It means, you're on the right track, or, ooh, that's something to pay attention to, or it's like a money sip. So if you see the sips going on, it's like,
So Jan will probably go back and rewatch this episode.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sips.
And then be like, yo, he was sipping like that one.
That's so funny.
Okay, let's see. A lot of these questions are the same. Hold on.
Oh, I guess to answer a question about May 3rd.
Oh yeah, can you please dispel that, because everyone is asking about that.
So what I was saying is that essentially between now and May 3rd, or when the time that I did that episode, May 3rd, I expect for us to be back at those highs for the NASDAQ. So that's what I was ultimately projecting, as well as us reaching newer highs for the S&P 500. So essentially that's not the end. That's also that could be just the start of the beginning for us to even go even further. So yeah,
All right,
like I said, I expect a very strong second half of the year, especially for tech. and many different other places, but really especially tech and consumer discretionary. So all is not lost come May 3rd. It's not like a May Day or something like that. It's probably more so in the sense of we're just getting started.
All right. So speaking of, getting started and things of that nature, NVIDIA announced 18 new products at their event plus partnerships. What is already baked in versus what's the new?
What is not baked in is having CPUs in the data center. That was never baked in. Like for me, a technophile like me, as well as a person who loves like companies like AMD and NVIDIA, I did not see that one coming at all. I knew that it was on the horizon, but I didn't think it was that close. But given in the sense that, where you leave people to their vices and also to their research, a lot of great things can happen. And I think that that's phenomenal in the sense that now you have a challenger to come in and legit challenge, the biggest juggernaut that's been in the server space or data center space, which is Intel, for quite some time. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Also, some other things that I already knew that were coming on the horizon, which was seeing NVIDIA partnering up with many different other vehicle manufacturers. And then on top of that, their deep learning that's been around for a minute. So they're just making upgrades there. So a lot of them were somewhat upgrades, but phenomenal upgrades. But the one that stole the show for real, was NVIDIA getting into the CPU space for data centers. And on top of that, like also hinting on the fact that, this ARM deal, we kind of have it in the bag, though that, I think that we went from 80, 80, 20, 80%. And like, I don't know about this one to now possibly 50-50, like maybe not, flip a coin. So honestly, where I see it is, and especially looking at where data is going, we're all going towards ARM as well as RSC. I think it's RSC1. So honestly, yeah, I think that's the one that stole the show. And I think that if you go look at any Wall Street analysts out there, if they said that, okay, hey, I knew that they knew that CPUs were going to be for data centers, honestly, feel free to put on your caps and say, hey, that they are lying. Because I don't think that anybody foresaw that one coming.
All right. So this is a general question to kind of close out this lightning round.
Okay.
Can you talk about the possible timeline for tech since passing of the regulation vote in the House?
A little bit more. Can you ask me that question again?
That's all it says. Can you talk about the possible timeline for tech since the passing of the regulation vote in the House?
The regulation vote in the House. I mean, honestly, it's like, with regulation is not going to stop innovation. I mean, innovation will continuously move. I think that tech will be just fine. I think that it's definitely needed because there are some regulations that are definitely needed in accordance. Tech has always been considered kind of like the Wild Wild West, but at the same token, I'm always good with regulation as long as regulation is there to regulate, but not to ultimately stifle. If regulation gets to a point where it stifles technology, then that's a problem. But if regulation ultimately helps give some guidelines and some balance to the sector, I'm totally on board with that. And I think that, again, technology will be just fine.
All right, so we're going to close out the questions. We got the majority of y'all's questions answered. So thank you for those who submitted questions on my IG stories. So now the final announcement before we go is, how do you all plan to say happy birthday to Kayla?
Kayla! Happy birthday,
Happy
Kayla!
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm sure that Kayla will post her Cash App on her Instagram. I'm just kidding. I don't know. But happy birthday, Kayla. I think that this is honestly super duper dope, where it's like you get to talk to a pioneer within the quantum computing space and interview. And then on top of that, it's like, doing it here where you could be doing anything else, but yet you're sitting here kicking it with us on your birthday.
On your
Happy birthday. For everybody that doesn't know, today's her birthday. So go ahead and throw up a happy birthday in the live chat for Kayla. Also, Kayla, we got a special gift coming for you soon. So,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
We got a special gift coming for you.
Okay.
We know that all monetary gifts goes towards the walkaway.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the runaway.
Jan, do you have any final thoughts you want to say or anything before we close out?
Well, it was a lot of fun, actually. I think it was the most fun show I've ever been to. So this was really great and awesome. And I really enjoyed it.
We're so glad you stayed up and drank however many cups of coffee you needed to be here. We truly appreciate your presence.
You did.
Very much, very honored.
And
Thank
Jan, you are always welcome on this stage at any time. So anytime that there's a breakthrough or that you would like to discuss or share any type of up-to-date news about what you guys are doing at IQM, we would love to have you or your team on board to come and sit down and chat with us anytime.
Sure, I'll let you know.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, y'all ready to I'm ready to go have dinner, and I know that Jan is probably gonna get some sleep. and Kayla's gonna go party up for her birthday.
I'm gonna try.
What are you
I'm gonna go work out. I gotta close these rings.
Oh, you gotta go close these rings?
Yeah, I haven't done anything today. I need to hop on it.
You ready to go?
I do have one just kind of a not announcement but reminder. Make sure you fill out the survey. It's still pending. It's still out there. So just wanna put that out.
Yeah.
And then application for the EPC close next Friday.
Say that again, Kayla?
The application for the EPC, if you want to join, closes next Friday.
All right.
So you're being at the cookout. Y'all want to be the EPC?
All right. That's the event planning committee, y'all, for the cookout next summer 2022 in Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you explained the acronym because I almost got a little stuck there. I was like,
Because you need to eat.
That is a fact. That is a fact. Well, until next time, y'all, I am Mark Monroe.
I'm Kayla Wilson.
Professor P. Bernice.
And Jan, hey.
And Jolene GC in the place to be.
And this has been the Cookout with a special edition of our Hot Take Thursday. We will see you all next week. Thank you.